always knew something was off. Not in the big dramatic way you see in movies. No long-lost birthmark or mysterious letters. Just a quiet, persistent feeling, like I'd walked into someone else's story and no one wanted to tell me. The night it finally clicked, I was 10. I'd gotten up for water and paused in the hallway because I heard my parents fighting. That wasn't unusual. What they said was, "You wanted him." My father hissed, "He's not mine." "He's not mine either," my mother snapped. I never agreed to raise someone else's mistake. My hand froze on the doorknob. I waited for one of them to walk it back, say they didn't mean it. They never did. Just silence. Then footsteps. I sprinted back to bed, pulled the covers over my head, and lay there, heart pounding, pretending I dreamed the whole thing. The next morning I asked Mom, just to see, "Am I adopted?" She laughed. Not kindly. "Where would you get an idea like that?" That was it. No denial. No comfort. Just that smile she used when I said something stupid in front of her friends. After that, I stopped asking questions. And I started performing. Straight as first place, valedictorian, MIT full ride. Launched a tech startup at 24. Didn't matter. My brother Alex would get a C in algebra and they'd throw him a pizza party. I'd land a $2 million contract and hear, "Ryan, you've always been clever. That's just your personality." I told myself it didn't bother me, that I didn't need their approval. But it did. And I did. Until the day they told the doctors I wasn't their son. And left me to die on the operating table. It happened on a Thursday. A sedan ran a red light. I don't remember the impact, just the sound. Metal against metal. Glass raining down like ice. Then blackness. When I opened my eyes again, everything was wrong. White ceiling. Slow beeping. The feeling that my body wasn't mine anymore. Couldn't move, but I could hear. And what I heard, I'll never forget. "He needs immediate neurosurgery," the doctor was saying. "We just need a family member's consent." "Ryan Mitchell," a nurse replied. "His parents are on the way." I felt this strange comfort, even in the fog. Like maybe for once they'd show up for me. They did show up. Just not the way I hoped. "He's not our son," my mother said, clear as crystal. "He's not family," my father added. "We're not responsible." The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet, horrified quiet. The kind that changes how people look at you forever. "Sir, ma'am, he listed you as next of kin," the doctor said, stunned. "That was his choice," Dad replied. "But we won't lie on legal documents." Then they left. Just walked out. No tears. No hesitation. Just the door clicking shut behind them like it was any other Thursday. The surgeon hesitated. I heard him ask, "What do we do now?" And then, like a gift from the universe, another voice spoke. "I'll sign." A nurse. Her name tag said Emily Ruiz. I'd never met her before. She didn't even look at me, just looked at the chart. Then the doctors. "I was with him when he coded. You want to wait for a signature while he dies? I'll sign." That's the moment the world cracked open. Because when I woke up 2 days later, barely conscious and barely alive, Emily was the one sitting by my bed. Not my family. Not Alex. Just her. And in her eyes, I saw something that shook me deeper than the crash ever could. Pity. Not for what happened, but for what I'd grown up thinking was love. They say the human body has a memory of its own. If that's true, mine remembers 2 things from those days in the ICU. Pain and silence. Emily checked on me constantly. She adjusted pillows, smuggled in real coffee, and sat with me during the longest hours. Not because she had to, her shift ended at 7. She stayed anyway. "You've got a high pain threshold," she said once, watching me grimace through a round of tests. I almost joked, "Try growing up in my house." But I didn't. Some wounds weren't funny yet. A week passed before Alex showed up. He walked into the hospital room like he'd taken a wrong turn at brunch. Khakis, buttoned down, confusion painted all over him. "Ryan," he said, like tasting the name for the first time in years. "You look like I got hit by a car?" I offered. He tried to smile. Failed. Mom and Dad. They told me you were stable, that you didn't want visitors. I stared at him for a long moment. Did they also tell you I made up the adoption thing? His eyes dropped. They said you were confused, that you'd always had identity issues. There it was. Gaslight, Phase 2. The Mitchell family specialty. Discredit, deflect, dismiss. Right? I said. Guess getting left to die counts as an identity issue now. Alex flinched. Good. I wanted him to flinch. Not because I hated him, but because for once, I needed someone else to feel the weight I'd been carrying since I was 10. He sat down slowly like gravity had suddenly increased. They didn't tell me what happened at the hospital, he said. Not the real version. I handed him the visitor's log. The timestamp showed their departure 9 minutes after arrival. The doctor's note, parents refused to authorize surgery. Alex read it twice, then set it down carefully like it might explode. He didn't say anything after that. But he didn't leave either. By the time I was discharged, I didn't go home. I went to her house instead. Martha Mitchell, my grandmother. The only person who ever loved me without trying to fix me. She'd passed 2 years earlier, but her house still stood like a memory no one had the heart to bulldoze. She left it to me. Quietly. In a letter delivered by her lawyer 1 month after her funeral. Tucked inside the envelope was the deed, the keys, and the truth. I wanted to tell you when you were ready. You were never theirs, Ryan. Your mother, your real mother, was my daughter, the one they pretend never existed. She was 16, and you were her whole world. I fought to raise you myself, but they insisted. Said they'd raise you like their own. I believed them. I shouldn't have. I'd read that letter 100 times. Thought I'd made peace with it. Then they left me on a gurney and proved every word was true. Martha's house was small, nothing flashy. A little cottage near Brookline with creaky floors and a kitchen that smelled like sugar even when no one was baking. But it was the only place I'd ever felt safe. And that made it mine. The first thing I did when I got there? Change the locks. The second? Install cameras. Every room. Every entry. Wired and cloud-backed. Then I sat at her old writing desk, same one I used to build Lego castles on, and started typing the letter I should have written years ago. Not to Alex. Not to Emily. To them. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was just honest. Every withheld hug. Every birthday skipped. Every he's not ours. Line by line. Moment by moment. I laid it all out. Then I printed it. Folded it. Placed it on the mantel with a post-it that said, for when you finally come looking for something. Because the next part? I wanted them to find it all by themselves. They showed up on a Sunday. Not to apologize. Not to check on me. They came for the house. I saw them on the camera feed, my father's stiff posture, my mother's impatient tapping on her phone. They knocked like they owned the place. When no one answered, they tried their old key. It didn't work. I watched from my laptop across town as my father muttered something, then walked around the back, checking windows like a man casing his own crime scene. That's when they saw the envelope. The letter was waiting for them, propped on the living room mantel like an exhibit. The front read simply, to the people who raised me. They broke in through the mudroom. Classy. My cameras recorded everything. My mother read it first. I'd written it plainly, no flowery language, no dramatics. Just facts. You said I imagined things. That I was confused. You said I wasn't yours, and you proved it when I was bleeding out on an operating table. You didn't raise me. You managed me. You tolerated me like a house guest you didn't invite. I know the truth now. And so will everyone else. There are copies of this letter in 3 places, your inboxes, the board of Dad's law firm, and the medical ethics committee that reviewed your refusal to sign for life-saving care. You've spent your whole lives pretending I didn't count. Now the world knows exactly how right you were. You win. I was never yours. So now neither is this. My mother's face crumbled halfway through. My father turned red, then pale, then something in between. They didn't speak. Not one word. They just stood there, 2 people who'd spent their lives controlling every narrative, now helpless in the face of one they couldn't spin. The footage went viral 48 hours later. Not because I leaked it. Because someone on the neighborhood watch saw them break in and called the cops, who arrived just in time to catch my father throwing the letter in the fireplace. Body cam footage. Public record. Poetic justice. But that wasn't the victory. That came later when Alex watched the video and, for the first time in his life, said words I never thought I'd hear. She's your son. And you left him to die. Alex showed up 2 days later, hands shaking, lips pale. He didn't knock. Just stood outside Martha's house until I opened the door. I saw the footage, he said, eyes locked on mine like he needed to anchor himself to something. I didn't believe it until I did. I stepped aside. Let him in. He looked around like he was seeing color for the first time in years. This house feels real, he said quietly. Because it is, I replied. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that isn't awkward, just overdue. I used to wonder, he finally said, why they treated you like a tenant. I didn't respond. Let him sit in it. He rubbed his face with both hands like he was trying to erase the last 20 years. I thought maybe you were just more independent. That you didn't need as much. I gave him a look. Yeah, he muttered. That was a lie, I told myself. I passed him a copy of the letter. The full one. Not the trimmed version our parents got, the one with all the footnotes, receipts, and details they used to hope I was too young to remember. He read it like it was a confession he hadn't realized he was part of. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. I should have stood up for you. You still can, I said. They're lawyering up, trying to claim the footage was doctored. He shook his head. They always think the world is paper they can rewrite. They're about to find out some paper doesn't burn. He looked at me then, really looked. I'm not them, he said. I want you to know that. I don't care about the money. Or the house. Or whatever name they've stained. I nodded. Then prove it. How? Tell the truth. That night, Alex went on record. Video. Statement. Everything. He told the full story of childhoods lived side by side and how mine was always colder. He admitted the bias, the manipulation, the silence. And then, in the final seconds, he looked into the camera and said, they always said Ryan wasn't family. That he wasn't one of us. But he was the only one acting like family ever meant something. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach them. 3 days after Alex's public statement, my father was quietly placed on leave from his law firm. The managing partners called it an internal review, but the real story made the rounds like wildfire. Turns out, representing medical clients while your own son accuses you of willfully denying life-saving care? Not a great look. Especially when there's body cam footage and an ethics board investigation looming overhead. Mom didn't fare much better. Her garden club, the one she ran like a suburban monarchy, ousted her. No ceremony. No explanation. Just a curt email saying the committee had decided to go in another direction. I heard it broke her more than the firm did him. They tried to push back, of course. Released a carefully worded statement through a PR firm. Something about miscommunication during a highly stressful medical emergency. But the footage didn't lie. Neither did the timestamps. And when the hospital's legal team verified the events, down to the minute they refused consent, there was no spinning it. People started asking questions. Why didn't they help? Why leave their son on the brink of death? And perhaps worst of all, why lie about it for so long? Their silence became its own kind of answer. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne or post victory quotes online. I just sat at Martha's desk and opened her old recipe book, the one with coffee stains and her handwriting curling along the margins. That night, I made her lemon cake from scratch. Not because I was happy, but because it felt like honoring the one person who never needed a camera to act with love. That's what they never understood. Justice doesn't need volume. It doesn't need revenge. It just needs the truth and the courage to let it breathe. And in the background, while their world crumbled under the weight of their own choices, I started building something else. Something better. I didn't want to be known for what they did. So I started planning something that mattered. It began with a notebook. Blank pages, ideas scribbled between doctor checkups and legal meetings. A question kept bouncing around my brain like a marble in a glass box. What if no one had been there to sign? What if Emily hadn't spoken up? What if the system had followed protocol, waited on family, and let time run out? That idea turned into research. The research became wireframes. The wireframes became code. A year earlier, I'd sold my tech company for enough to coast the rest of my life. But comfort doesn't mean peace, not when you know how easily someone like you can be erased because no one claimed you fast enough. So I built something new. A system that used biometric data, emergency directives, and blockchain authentication to let patients assign medical proxies through secure verification. No paper, no waiting room panic. It was quiet work. Precise. Not flashy. But it had teeth. And every line of code felt like stitching over an old wound. Emily helped. She didn't want the credit, but I gave it to her anyway, listed her as co-founder. Said if anyone deserved to help rewrite the rules, it was the person who broke them to save a stranger's life. She cried the first time she saw the prototype. You really did this, she whispered. No, I said. We did. In the evenings, I'd walk through Martha's garden. The tomatoes had overgrown their cages. The lavender had taken over the path. She would have called it wild, but not in a bad way. More like alive. That was what I was building now. Not revenge. Roots. The letter came in spring. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen since high school birthday cards. Inside was one line. I saw what they did. I'm sorry it took this long. Can we talk? Alex. I didn't respond. Not right away. Not out of anger, but because I wasn't sure which version of him I was going to get. The brother who stood by and watched? Or the one who finally spoke out? A week passed. Then one Sunday morning I opened the door to find him standing there. No fanfare. No speech. He was holding lemon cake. Martha's recipe. I tried to bake it, he said. It's not right, but I figured that was kind of the point. I stepped aside. We didn't talk about the footage, or the lawsuits, or the fact that our parents had quietly sold their house and left Boston like fugitives from a story they couldn't rewrite. Instead, we talked about the dog we had when we were kids. The one they gave away when I was 12 without telling me. About how Alex found out a week later and said nothing. I always thought you didn't want him either, he admitted, eyes low. But now I know you just weren't asked. I nodded. That's how it always was. Not anymore, he said. We talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. It was awkward. Stilted. But it was real and that was new. As he left, he turned back and said something that stayed with me longer than any court ruling or headline ever could. They lost a son. But I'm hoping I haven't lost a brother. And in that moment I realized something strange. Forgiveness wasn't a door you kicked open. It was a handle both people had to reach for at the same time. It was almost exactly 1 year after the accident when I hosted my first real dinner. Not a holiday. Not a birthday. Just dinner. 7 chairs. 1 long table. No one from the old world. There was Emily, still in scrubs, who brought a bottle of wine she claimed was too fancy to pronounce. There was Alex, who showed up with store-bought bread and the kind of awkwardness that only comes from trying. There were 2 colleagues from the startup, both engineers, both barely old enough to remember dial-up, and they brought noise and laughter like confetti. And there was Ms. Redding from next door. 82 years old, hard of hearing, sharper than a scalpel. She brought peach cobbler and critiques of everyone's posture. I made pasta. From scratch. It was overcooked. No one cared. As we passed plates and spilled stories, I looked around and realized something I never thought I'd say. I wasn't lonely anymore. Not because I had a family. Because I had people, the kind who chose to show up. Not out of duty. Not because they had to. Because they wanted to. After dessert, Alex helped me clean up. No words. Just plates and quiet and a rhythm that felt old but not broken. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You know they kept telling me you'd move on and forget all this. But they never understood forgetting isn't healing." I paused, a dish in each hand. "No," I said. "It's not." He nodded. "But maybe this is." That night, I stood alone in the kitchen. Lights low. Plates drying. And I realized something so simple it made my throat catch. I hadn't just survived them. I'd outgrown them. 2 months after that dinner, we launched the beta. Athena Protocol, the system born from a hospital bed and a broken family. A medical identity platform that let patients assign emergency proxies in real time with a single fingerprint or voice scan. No red tape. No loopholes. No, we need a family signature. We rolled it out quietly, a few partner clinics in Massachusetts, then a test run with veterans hospitals. The response was bigger than we expected. Emails poured in. From doctors. From nurses. From people like me, sons and daughters who'd been forgotten, written off, or treated like paperwork. But one message stuck out. My daughter was hit by a car. She was alone. Your platform let me authorize surgery in seconds from another state. They said she would have died otherwise. I don't know who you are, but thank you. CM. I sat with that email for a long time. Not because it made me proud, but because it made something else rise in my chest, relief. The kind you only feel when you realize the worst thing that ever happened to you might just save someone else. Emily called that night. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally am." We didn't need to say what it meant. The anger had burned off. The grief had dried. What was left was quieter and heavier in its own way. But it was mine. Not borrowed from Martha. Not stolen by my parents. Not built to prove anything. Just a life. A legacy. On my terms. And for the first time since that 10-year-old boy stood in the hallway and heard the words that broke him, I felt whole. The envelope came in late summer. Cream-colored. No return address. Postmarked from Arizona. Inside, a letter in my mother's handwriting. "Ryan, We sold the house. Your father retired early. We're moving somewhere quieter. I doubt you care. I'm not writing for forgiveness. We know we lost that chance. I just wanted you to know we're leaving Boston. We saw your interview. About Athena. About the accident. You didn't mention us once. That hurt more than I expected. But maybe we earned that silence. Anyway, this is goodbye. Whatever you think of us, I hope one day you'll believe we tried, even if we failed. Your mother? I know you probably don't call me that anymore. I stared at that letter a long time. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even an apology. It was a faint knock on a door she knew I wasn't going to open. I didn't write back. I didn't have anything left to say to people who only acknowledged harm when their legacy was on the line. But I did something else. I drove to the old house, the one they sold, just to see it. Empty, cleaned out, like they'd never existed there. And in that silence, standing in front of the same bricks I used to scrape my knees on as a kid, I felt a strange calm. Not satisfaction, not revenge. Peace. I'd outlived their expectations, outlasted their indifference, outgrew their definition of family. And that was enough. It was raining the night Alex came back. Not just a drizzle, the kind of rain that fills gutters and makes the world feel hushed. I was in the middle of fixing the screen door when I heard his voice behind me. Still using duct tape like it's a personality trait? I didn't turn around, just kept working. It held our childhood together. Figured it might work on this door, too. He walked up slowly, umbrella dripping, a brown paper bag in hand. Lasagna, he said. Not mine. It'd kill you. I asked Ms. Redding. I let him in. We didn't eat right away. Just sat at the kitchen table, steam fogging the windows, the smell of garlic and rosemary filling the silence. Then he reached into his coat pocket and slid over a photo. It was us, 2 kids on a swing set. I was maybe 6. He had a juice box and a crooked grin. I looked like I didn't know how to smile. I found it in one of Mom's old boxes before they left, he said. Figured you'd want the evidence. Of what? I asked. That you were always part of the picture. I looked at it, at the little boy who hadn't known yet how conditional love could be. You ever wonder, I said, what we'd be like if things had been different? Alex shrugged. Maybe we'd be closer. Maybe we'd still be strangers. But here we are. I nodded. Yeah, here we are. We ate, talked, not like brothers trying to make up for lost years. More like 2 men trying to share the ones ahead. Before he left, he paused at the door. You left the porch light on, he said, half a smile on his face. Didn't mean to, I replied. He looked at me. Yeah, I said finally. Maybe I did. A year to the day after the accident, I wrote another letter. But this one wasn't for my parents. Wasn't for the courts or the cameras or anyone who ever tried to write me out. It was for me. I sat at Martha's desk. Same seat, same mug, same soft creak of the chair beneath me. And I began, Dear Ryan, you've spent most of your life proving you're worthy of something that never existed. A version of love with strings. A definition of family that came with conditions. You got perfect grades, built companies, fought for space in a house that never had your name on the door. And none of it changed them, but it changed you. You didn't survive them by becoming colder. You didn't get even. You got honest. You built something real. You gave people what you never got. Protection. Truth. A voice in the room when they couldn't speak for themselves. You became a better man than the people who tried to erase you. So this letter? It's not a confrontation. It's a declaration. You are no longer waiting to be claimed. You are no longer trying to earn what should have been given freely. You are done chasing ghosts. You are your own bloodline now. Me. I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and tucked it beside Martha's recipe book. No one else would read it. It wasn't meant for the world. Just the boy who'd once stood in the hallway, heart pounding, realizing he didn't belong. And the man who finally understood he didn't have to. Thanksgiving looked different that year. No long table with forced smiles. No sterile china in a house that smelled like cold perfume and colder conversation. Just a mismatched set of chairs. a chipped serving bowl Martha had used since I was 6. And people who had nothing to prove because they'd already shown up when it counted. Emily brought wine again. Alex made his terrible mashed potatoes. Ms. Redding told the same story twice. We let her. One of my developers brought her girlfriend and 2 pies. One was awful. The other was destroyed in 10 minutes. We went around the table sharing one thing we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I didn't speak right away. I looked around at the circle of people who didn't share blood but shared something deeper. I'm thankful, I said, that I learned what family really is. Emily reached across and squeezed my hand. Alex nodded, quiet but steady. We clinked glasses, laughed, ate too much. And when the night wound down and the last guest left, I stood on the porch and let the quiet settle in. No ghosts, no shadows, no knocking on closed doors. Just me, right where I belonged.